Today, we are diving into a book that honestly changed the game for millions of people when it comes to money. Rich Dad, Poor Dad. We're going to break down its core idea, which really goes after a piece of advice that I'm sure every single one of us has heard a million times.
I mean, come on, who hasn't heard this one, right? Go to school, get good grades, find a safe job. For our parents' generation, and maybe even for us, this was the gold standard. It was the blueprint for a successful life, handed down with the best of intentions.
But here's the thing, and this is the book's central point. The world that plan was built for, it's not really our world anymore. The hard truth is, great grades and a secure job are no longer a guarantee of financial freedom. The old rules just don't seem to apply in the same way.
So yeah, the old rules are broken. And what happens when you follow them anyway? Well, the book argues that this path often leads people straight into a trap that has you working your entire life, but never really getting anywhere. And it has a name you've definitely heard before, the rat race.
So what exactly is the rat race? Well, it's this vicious cycle. You work to earn money, right? But the more you earn, the more you spend, and the more you pay in taxes. And you end up completely trapped, always needing that next paycheck just to stay afloat. And this breaks it down perfectly. It all starts with getting a job. Then you earn more money, which lets you buy the house, the car, all that stuff. But now you have bigger bills, so you have to work even harder for a raise or promotion. And what does that get you? A bigger tax bill. It's a hamster wheel, and you're just running faster and faster. The whole book is about how to get off this wheel, and it starts by looking at two totally different mindsets. So this is the core of the whole book. Kiyosaki learned about money through two father figures. First, there was his actual father, who he calls his poor dad. Super smart guy, highly educated, stable government job. And then there was his best friend's father, his rich dad, who was an 8th grade dropout but became an incredibly successful entrepreneur. The biggest difference between them wasn't how much they earned, but how they thought.
And wow, look at this contrast. It's like night and day. Poor dad would say, the love of money is the root of all evil. Rich dad would flip it and say, the lack of money is the root of all evil. Poor dad's advice was, find a good company to work for. Rich dad's was, find a good company to buy. And this last one is a big one. Poor dad thought his house was his greatest asset. Rich dad said his house was a liability. Why? The definition was simple. An asset puts money in your pocket, a liability takes money out of it. These aren't just slightly different opinions. They're two completely different financial realities.
So you can imagine being a kid, hearing these two totally opposite views. What do you do? For Kiyosaki, it was actually a huge advantage. It forced him to stop and think for himself. He couldn't just blindly follow one path. He had to analyze them, compare them, and then choose. That process of critical thinking, that was the start of his real financial education. And it all kicked off with one powerful hands-on lesson. And this is where the story really begins. It's how Rich Dad taught Robert his very first and maybe most important lesson. It didn't happen in a classroom or an office. Nope. It happened in the back of a convenience store.
Okay, so picture this. Robert and his friend Mike are just 9 years old, and they're tired of being the poor kids. So they go up to Rich Dad and ask him straight up, will you teach us how to get rich? His answer? Sure. He offered them a job dusting cans in his shop for 10 cents an hour. 10 cents. Even back then, that was basically nothing, but, it was an offer, so they took it.
So for 3 weeks straight, they did this boring, tedious work. And at the end of it all, they'd get a few dimes. Robert started to get really angry. He felt cheated, used, and worst of all, he felt like he wasn't learning a single thing about making money. He was ready to walk.
But that frustration, that was the whole point. When Robert finally confronted him, Rich Dad explained that the feeling he had, being underpaid, unappreciated, angry at your boss, that was a taste of life. That's how most people feel every single day. He was letting life push them around on purpose, just to see what they would do about it.
And right then, he was ready to give them the real lesson. Lesson number 1, the one core idea that, he said, separates the rich from everybody else.
And this is it. This is probably the most famous line from the entire book. The poor and the middle class work for money. The rich have money work for them. The whole rat race is built on that first half. The way out is to master the second half. And to really hammer this lesson home, Rich Dad made them an even more shocking offer.
He told them to get back to work, but this time he was going to pay them zero. Nothing. Can you imagine? The entire goal was to break their brain's dependence on a paycheck. By taking away the wage, he forced them to stop thinking like employees and start thinking like owners. So how on earth does working for free lead to a breakthrough? Well, when Robert's mind was no longer obsessed with earning a few cents an hour, it was suddenly free to just look around and to actually see.
So many of us are so focused on our job security and our next paycheck that we walk right past opportunities every single day. But once Robert's mind was disconnected from that wage, he noticed something that happened every week in that store that was an opportunity just hiding in plain sight.
He saw that when the new comics came in, the distributor would just rip the front cover off the old ones for credit and tell the store owner to throw the rest of the comic book away. So Robert asked a simple question: can we have them? He and Mike took these worthless comics, cleaned out an empty room in a basement, and started their own comic book library. They charged other kids 10 cents to come in and read as many comics as they wanted. They even hired Mike's sister to be the librarian.
And get this, their little business started making $9.50 a week. For two 9-year-olds in the 1950s, that was a huge amount of money. But here's the magic part. It was making that money for them even when they weren't there. They had done it. They had created an asset. Their idea was now working for them.
This was the final piece of the lesson. By forcing them to work for free, Rich Dad had rewired their brains to look for opportunities, not just paychecks. And that skill, he said, was the real key to escaping the rat race and building wealth.
And that really leaves us with the central question of the entire book. It's a question for all of us to think about. In our own lives, our careers, what are we focused on? Are we just looking for that next paycheck to get by, or are our eyes open looking for the opportunities that are right there in front of us? According to Kiyosaki, the answer to that question makes all the difference in the world.